When people ask about the work of the brothers here in the Southwest, I think the involvement in higher education is going to get a very good reputation, a very good image. Now, first thing to keep in mind is, how did this come about? Apparently, before the First World War, out in this part of the country and in several other parts of the country, you had institutions which called themselves colleges. However, most of their students seem to have been on the secondary level, and possibly the big colleges in the East would have said they hardly were institutions of higher education. So St. Michael's College was not unique in, say, 1920. There were many other institutions in that same situation. However, around 1920, many of these institutions were forced to make a decision. You're really going to become an institution of higher education, or you're simply going to remain an institution offering work on the secondary level. As far as St. Michael's College was concerned, that there was very little choice except to say we will remain an institution on the secondary level. The French brothers, who were now conducting the school, now adjusting to a new situation, were hardly prepared to establish an institution of higher education. So the institution became mainly, essentially, a secondary institution. However, one thing remained unchanged. 1874, the charter for the College of the Christian Brothers of New Mexico had been given by the territorial legislature. Nobody could take that away, and that the brothers could start an institution of higher education if they wanted to do so. Now, of course, they had to ask the question, well, what does this require? Are we ready to do this? How do we do this? And the decisions implemented in New Mexico, which said, well, there will not be an institution of higher education at Santa Fe, at the College of Santa Fe. Something will have to change, and we'll have to wait. Prior to World War II, the idea common in the United States, and there might be people here who agree with me from experiencing this, you were rich, you went to college. That ordinary people didn't go to college. Oh, by the way, they had a few athletes who went to college, but they didn't go there for any academic purpose. They went to be on the teams, and that's why they were there. So this was a situation in 1940. Come 1944, 1945, the Congress of the United States wanted to pass what became famous as the GI Bill of Rights. A couple of members of Congress said, why don't we include support for college education for those veterans who want to go to college when the war is over and they get out of the service? Well, most of the other members of Congress said, you can put it in. None of them want to go to college. It doesn't come to nothing. It sounds nice, though. A few might take advantage of it, but nothing will come out of this. Of course, what is it? They found out that this was not the case, that many of these young men, some approaching the age of 30, said, finally, I can get a higher education. The situation here in New Mexico was very interesting. At this time, and until almost 1960, there was only one institution of higher education in New Mexico that give you a PhD, the University of New Mexico. And some people claim they were maintaining that exclusive right, making sure nobody else would do it. So in other words, the opportunities for higher education were not that abundant. Now, there were also some other problems. Catholic Hispanics seemed to feel, right or wrong, when they went to the state institutions of higher education, where most of the faculty were not of Spanish ancestry, that they really weren't wanted. They were discriminated against. They were almost, if you weren't helped to fail out, leave, we'll get rid of you. Well, what did this mean? Well, if somebody of Hispanic origin wanted a higher education, they could go to Denver. they could go to the California schools, but many of them said this was financially impossible. So you had no opportunity for Hispanic Catholics and any Hispanics to obtain a college degree, go on to higher studies. This was the situation in New Mexico, and in 1934, when the St. Michael celebrated its 75th anniversary, the question was raised, can't we start an institution of higher education? Well, as I said, that the Depression situation, most people said simply, we can't do it. And of course, I think the saying was, well, let's look to the future for this. Someone who became very interested in this was Brother Benildus of Mary. Anybody who remembers him would remember a man of tremendous proportions. When people first saw him, that we wouldn't say he was overweight, you had to find a better expression. However, he was also an extremely capable administrator, extremely capable schoolman, and that he expressed some interest in this. Well, how are we going to go into this? Now, another step was taken by the brothers. The first brother from the New Orleans Santa Fe district was sent to Catholic University of America to get his doctorate. There was not a single brother in the New Orleans Santa Fe district who had an earned doctorate. The first man was sent off to study. And of course, the idea was others would be sent, and in time, you would have a corps of brothers who would be prepared to start an institution of higher education. There was also a problem which I mentioned, that how to provide a bachelor's degree for the young brothers, that they could obtain their teacher certificates. This was a question which seemed to need an answer, and also there was a feeling that in the future it would need an answer more and more. And of course, the answer people felt around 1945, 1946, as the war ended, as the colleges started to boom with the GIs, the answer is that the brothers here in New Mexico should open an institution of higher education. We should have a college. Brother Benildus finished his term as principal here, president of St. Michael's College in 1944, and one of the assignments he was given was to see how it is possible to set about opening a college, an institution of higher education for the district, and probably here in New Mexico. Well, the first idea was, everybody had this idea, let's have a drive, see how much money we can raise, because definitely money would be needed. And the target of the drive was $500,000. If today someone suggested you open a new college with $500,000, you would probably sit down and laugh and say, couldn't even get to first base on this. Well, in 1944, 1945, this sounded like a possibility. And the idea was on this property here, which was owned by the brothers then, some of the open space, empty space, they put up the buildings they needed for an institution of higher education. It would be done. Unfortunately, the drive produced a little more than $100,000. And somebody said, perhaps this showed how much money was available. So what do we do now? How are we going to do something about this? Well, there was still the determination to open a college. And then the brothers became conscious of an institution that had been built up in Santa Fe, I think starting around 1943. Bruns General Hospital, an Army hospital. I understand one purpose it was built was to provide treatment for men who had been in the Southwest Pacific area, had contracted malaria, and of course the atmosphere here, the altitude, was a perfect place for them to recover. However, in August 1945, when the war came to an end, there was almost an immediate feeling, well, just a moment. Bruns General Hospital will run for a year or two. The young men who need this treatment will get the treatment, and then the hospital is going to close. Well, the people of Santa Fe were very interested in having something replace Bruns General Hospital on that land, if necessary, using some of the buildings. And who wants to do this? People all over northern New Mexico were interested in getting these barracks buildings. If you travel around the area, you might find some of these barracks buildings that have been transported in the most unlikely places you can imagine. And of course, the buildings would all be taken away, the land would be vacant. What would this mean for the Santa Fe economy? Nothing. Well, isn't anybody interested in taking the land, some of the buildings, setting something up there? Brother Benilde said yes. The Brothers of the Christian Schools. This way they would like to locate the College of the Christian Brothers of New Mexico. They got a lot of support from a lot of people because nobody else wanted to keep the land and to set up any kind of an institution there that would contribute to the local economy. So Senator Dennis Chavez, who was a power in the U.S. Senate, Senator Anton Fernandez, who was a power in the U.S. House, and various state officials all started supporting the drive to give the property, or at least a lot of the property, and a number of the barracks to the brothers so they could open a college there, establish an institution of higher education. And with all this help, and probably because I say no one else wanted to take the land and open an institution, on the 7th of May, 1947, 123 acres of land and 37 buildings were given to the brothers so they could open the College of the Christian Brothers of New Mexico. By the way, the U.S. government said the value of this was $1,358,000. However, if the brothers took this, established a school there, kept the school going for 20 years, each year the amount they would have to pay if they wanted to buy it went down significantly. After 20 years, they could have it, pay nothing. And of course, the brothers decided that with the finances they had, the best thing to do was to keep it for 20 years. And I can remember, I think it was sometime in 1969, when the papers were signed, it's now yours, it no longer belongs to the government. You got it free of charge. Okay? Well, let's see, there were 37 buildings in which a college was to be established. If you'd have looked at the interior of the buildings, you would have said, they're not quite ready for that. In the summer of 1947, every brother in the district who was a good carpenter, a good plumber, a good electrician, a good painter, a good worker with cement, they were all assigned to Santa Fe to work on converting the buildings there into a college. They were going to set up a building for administration, set up a building for the library, set up buildings for classrooms, set up buildings for the dormitories, set up buildings for the science labs. And I guess for 10 or 12 weeks, probably 10 weeks, these brothers worked, converting these buildings, and in this, the district made an incredible contribution because with the money available, it was possible to convert enough of these buildings for ready use, so in September 1947, the college could open. By the way, 5 or 6 of the buildings were converted into the Scholasticate, where the young brothers would live while they attended classes along with the other students. On the 10th of August, 1947, we closed down the Scholasticate in Las Vegas, New Mexico, and we came over here, and we started doing work, fixing up these barrack buildings so they would be ready for use in September when the new college opened. And this way, the district made an incredible contribution. On the 15th of September, 1947, Archbishop Byrne blessed the new college buildings, and Brother Benilde took over as the first president of the College of St. Michael's College, a position he held until his death at 52 in 1957. So a college was established, ready to function. What would happen now? Now, possibly some of you are going to feel I'm going to spend too much time on what follows. You should keep in mind, I was one of the scholastics who got a few blisters on his hand, converting the barracks ready for college use. I was one of the first students enrolled in September 1957. I graduated in the class of 52, one of 25 who received our bachelor's degrees. And then in 1958, I was told by the brother visitor, these were pre-Vatican II days, I wanted to teach college. I was not aware of that, but I was sent here. And in September 1958, I started teaching at the college and continued to do so essentially through May 1988. So I feel a certain attachment and involvement to the place. By the way, the tradition of the brothers building the college, if necessary, was maintained. I believe Brother Brian was a good member of the roofing crew that repaired roofs as they were needed on the barracks. In 1961, because we were getting our first permanent building, it was decided to convert one of the barracks into faculty offices, which was something badly needed. Well, on a Friday afternoon and a Saturday morning, the brothers of the faculty got together with a few other brothers, completely gutted the inside of this barracks building so that when the contractor showed up on Monday morning, they could start building. And of course, our having gutted the building like this saved a considerable sum of money for doing the construction work in there. Oh, by the way, when the construction work was finished, we had gathered desks from all over government surplus, and we're bringing them over so that they could be put in the various new faculty offices. We also had bookcases. Brother Ernest Cacagna, who was pushing his 80th birthday, among other things, he was a veteran of the French Army in World War I. He had been brother visitor for 9 years. He was in there finishing the tops of the desks so that when the faculty came in the new offices, everything was ready. This was an example of how the brothers built the college, really built it. And we, as I say, sometimes we got some blisters on our hands. The college started off with a rather low enrollment, 100 and some students. And in 1950, when the school year ended, there were 257 students, and it looked like there'd be more for the 50-51 school year, except on June 25th, 1950, North Korea invaded South Korea, starting the Korean War, and young men were being called up for military service, and particularly it seemed like young men from northern New Mexico were being called up. The enrollment at the college took a real nosedive, and the question was raised, if we cannot get more students, is it humanly possible to keep this institution functioning? And there was a fear that this wouldn't happen. However, the brothers found a solution to this problem. They started evening classes, which apparently people had asked for. They found people working for all the levels of government here in Santa Fe. What was it, national, state, county, city, all looking for chances to get courses, get better qualified for jobs. And they started evening classes. And of course, these students were not subject to military service. Evening classes started under some interesting limitations. The classes could be co-ed, but if it was a co-ed class, a brother couldn't teach it. Another faculty member had to teach the class. However, during the summer, it was discovered that sisters wanted to get courses here. So during the summer, the brothers could teach women, sisters, but not non-sisters. Under these limitations, we functioned, and you might say things are getting quite interesting. Oh, by the way, when I arrived in 1958, we had reached a situation where some of these ladies needed certain courses to finish their degree. And because of the course and who had the training, a brother was the usual teacher. So you would be asked on the sly, would it be okay if there are 2 or 3 co-eds in your class? By the way, some of these co-eds were my age, some almost old enough to be my mother, and I always said okay. And of course, there was always that we might hear from Rome, what are you people doing? We never did. and that we increased the enrollment in the evening classes. Some of these people finally got their degrees, and the college was functioning nicely. By the way, since 1954, the end of the Korean War, enrollment started to pick up again, and we heard about the baby boom that would produce more students, as it did. A number of brothers, not just brothers of the Christian schools on the East Coast, where students were struggling to find space in colleges, recommended some of their high school students come to Santa Fe. And we got very interesting groups of students from these schools. Many of them graduated and claimed that Santa Fe had been a great experience. In 1958, Brother Cyprian Luke took over as president, and he realized now things had settled down to the point where we needed North Central accreditation. Up to this time, it would have been sort of prudent to say, we're not simply ready to apply. Things just are not that good standing. But now they are. So we have to get busy working on this. And of course, this meant that faculty had to acquire higher degrees. Since I had just joined the college without a graduate credit to my name, I started doing my graduate work part-time at University of New Mexico, where I was able to get both my MA and my PhD. I don't recommend that to anybody, but again, it was one of the experiences, and other brothers had done equally good things. In 1961, with loans, with money donated by some of our successful high schools, we were able to put up the first permanent building, named Brother Benilda's Hall in honor of the first president, and also to have our first visit by the North Central. 1962, with a government loan, we got LaSalle Hall, our first permanent dorm. By the way, the students claimed they were happy in the barrack dorms than they were in the new permanent dorm. I don't know what was the basis for that. I lived for 3 years in the barrack dorms, and all I would say is it was a very interesting educational experience for the brother moderator living there. I don't know for what, for the students. Okay. 1965, because we had built up the institution, because we had these permanent buildings, faculty with advanced degrees, we were accredited by North Central Administration, North Central Association, and we were able to expand still more. And of course, right or wrong, some people might say, you really wanted to take advantage of this? The Vietnam War situation, if you were in college, you would not be called up for military service, that the dorms were full, and if somebody was aboard and didn't show up, you phoned somebody on the waiting list who came running to take his place. Enrollment boomed. I think we had around 600 boarders, and this was a very important part of the total enrollment. So the schools seem to be very well established. However, something else happened. 1962 to 1965, Vatican II Council, and after 1966, there is what is called in the Catholic Church, particularly in the United States, the post-Vatican II vocation crisis. Religious, nuns, priests, brothers leaving their institution. And under North Central, each brother was an asset. You had the same salary on paper as somebody with your rank, your degree, but only a small part of this went to the religious community to support you. The rest of it went back to the college as a financial donation to support the institution. As the number of brothers went down, the contributions here went down, and the college began to feel there was a financial problem. Also, the number of brothers qualified, interested in doing administrative work was always kind of limited. I never felt any great attraction for it myself. And it was necessary now to have more non-brothers as administrators, as faculty, and of course their salaries were higher than those that had gone to the brothers. This produced a financial problem which the college was constantly dealing with. However, while this was going on, there were a number of things that happened which I think show the college was achieving things. It had been noted by a number of people that the small religious colleges, Catholic and Protestant, often had two main programs, teacher training and business, and that many of their alumni went into those areas and made some very significant contributions. One time I found out accidentally the United States government was interested in hiring our business graduates, particularly those with good in bookkeeping. They needed to check on some of the big business, and they had discovered that some of the graduates from many of the prestigious universities in business seemed to be either not too competent or not too conscientious about what the companies were doing. They said those who graduated from the Catholic and Protestant colleges were very often willing to blow the whistle on these people, which is what the government wanted. So people were being well trained and also getting some religious training. This was important. Okay. We established a penitentiary program, which we had on 3 or 4 occasions. I taught out there a number of courses. I found my family and relatives were more concerned about my safety when I was inside the penitentiary than I ever was. The inmates showed the greatest respect for the brothers and the other faculty who came to teach them courses, and that we all felt perfectly safe, and this was absolutely true. By the way, the brothers made one contribution to this program, which was always underfunded. There was a limited stipend you got for teaching one course at the penitentiary. The stipend the brother got just went back into the program, not to the brothers' community, to help support it. So we were doing some gratuitous teaching there. Okay. When we received all these freshman boarders from the various brothers' high schools all over the country, some of them you looked at their high school records and you said, well, they might have a little problem getting a college degree. A program was organized for the boarders. They had to put in a couple of hours of study every afternoon in the dorm, unless they were in a lab or in a PE course. Many of them expressed opinions about that, which I can't repeat since there are ladies in the room here. But after a while, they suddenly discovered they were passing their courses, sometimes even getting B's in courses that they hadn't done too well in the equivalent in high school. I can graduate from college, and again, North Central commented on how those who finished the second year had really improved vastly. So this was a program to help teachers, help students who really needed some help. We started a bachelor's program in social work, which was going very well until I think there were too many people trained in social work, and after this, only the master's degree counted, and we were in no position to start a master's program. But those who got the bachelor's program found employment in many places. And again, we were told that they had been well trained to work in various social programs. So this was something that was good. The nursing program was established and heavily subsidized by the government. Of course, we found out nobody could run a nursing program without some kind of subsidy. It simply required too many teachers. The interesting thing was the first 30 students who graduated, and that was the maximum size you could have for a class, all took the RN test and passed on the first try. This made some impression about the students who went into nursing. We ran an Upward Bound program which trained students from high schools, prepared them to go to college. And again, a number of them were prepared. They got to college, and they found out they could get a higher degree. And then a career opportunity program was run to train teacher aides and a few teachers. One of the ladies who graduated from this program became certified as a teacher, insisted, as long as we were meeting each other, that the brothers had really saved her, that she got her degree, got her teacher certificate, and she became a very successful teacher in high school. And these teaching aides did very valuable work in the elementary schools, where very often they had to help the students become multilingual, English as well as Spanish. Another successful program. So what would I say about all this? The brothers, supported by many of our other teachers, really did a lot of work to train people. And I think all of this was in the spirit of St. Lasalle. He gave writing a very important role in his schools around 1700. Why was that? The government was creating all kinds of government offices, the French government. Anyone who could write and read could get a good job in this, and many boys who came from families where the father and mother were day workers, they found work each day. These boys mastered this writing, went to work in these government business offices, and became very successful fathers of families, and apparently the religious training rubbed off on them. So I feel that the programs we ran were very much in the spirit of St. Lasalle. One thing which helped run many of these programs was the College of Santa Fe alumni. Their activity and support, their interest was very important. And I think the college did as well as it did in so many things because of their support. Their bingo raised large sums of money, and each year they gave the proceeds from the foundation to the college to help support it. So we owed a lot there. The move into arts courses, drama courses, was something people were telling us, this is Santa Fe. This is what you should move into. And we did. And of course, today, some people ask whether or not this was really the best programs to run. 20/20 hindsight is always much better than when you got to make the decisions. What happened here? Well, the college, lacking financial support, Brother Benildus had tried almost immediately to get money from different ways. Most of them did not really work out. The fact the college went as long as it did, probably some of the money he brought in had been successful at keeping it going. That in May 2009, it was necessary to accept the fact the college could no longer continue. I feel a great loss after my days as a student, a faculty member, someone who had helped in some ways develop the college. But I think over the period from 1947 to 2009, which would be, some 62 years, that the college had made a big impact on northern New Mexico. I've met those early graduates who became teachers and went and worked in the New Mexico schools, the small town schools. They did a very good job. So we were making a contribution here. Okay, so these are some of the things I have to mention. How about the rest of the activities of the brothers? Well, when the brothers abandoned Sacred Heart Training College in August 1947, it became West Las Vegas Junior High School with 4 brothers on the faculty and a brother principal. I've always been curious about whether or not the school ever became co-ed when the brothers were there, and I can't seem to get an answer. But anyway, the brothers taught there, administered. They were allowed to live in the building. One of our jokes was who wanted to live in that building, but they managed to fix up their rooms. Of course, they were getting good state teacher salaries. And several brothers who visited the place years after it became a junior high school said, really, the place isn't bad now. There's heat in the building. Prior to 1947, sometimes heat was very scarce. We were cold. So this was a school established, and it looked like had a future. St. Nicholas School in Bernalillo celebrated its 75th anniversary in late 1947, and things seemed to be going very well there. The brothers had used their state salaries, some of the money, to improve the facilities, improve their living quarters. After World War II, there was a uniform salary scale here in New Mexico, so a poor county like Sandoval did not have lower salaries than a better-off county. The brothers' salaries went up accordingly. brothers with master's degrees were getting, by compare the rest of us, absolutely fabulous salaries for teaching elementary school. They were building the institution up, and it looked like the people were very happy with what they were doing, and the future was very great. However, once again, something happened. I can remember as a young brother and as a college student, after 1946, this question was arising of government support for Catholic schools. And the separation of church and state issue was popping up. And of course, you had the people who insisted parents had the first right to pick the school for their students. If the government wanted them to go to school, they should simply support the school the parents want. And don't talk about the separation of church and state. You had other people completely opposed to this, and there was very definitely an argument going on. A case started in Dixon, New Mexico, which claimed, of course, that the school there, run by the sisters, was violating separation of church and state. Now, talking to brothers who taught at St. Nicholas, they told me how they had worked up to this time. 15 minutes before the real school day started, the Catholic students gathered with the brothers for prayers and some religious instruction. Then all the students came and ran the school day. At the end of the regular school day, the last half hour, some students left. The Catholic students got their catechism lesson from the brothers. And of course, I was told if you looked in the classrooms, they did not look too different from the classrooms in our other elementary schools. So the question was raised through the Dixon case about whether or not the school was really violating separation of church and state. And the case got to be, I would say, kind of caused quite a bit of bitterness in New Mexico. A decision was reached, and one of the points in the decision was that those nuns, priests, and brothers who were taught in these public schools up to this time had violated separation of church and state. Therefore, no time in the future could they teach in a public school in New Mexico. However, if you replaced all the brothers or priests and nuns in one of these schools, a whole new crew, they were not forbidden to teach. They would, get salaries according to their certificate, their teaching experience, so no point there. And St. Nicholas changed the faculty completely. So did West Las Vegas Junior High. However, there were other things connected with the decision. I'm really still trying to find a good history of the decision, not somebody telling me I'm dead set against it or I'm all for it. And what exactly was decided? That the Archbishop of Santa Fe thought that it was impossible for the nuns, brothers, priests to continue teaching in the public schools. Therefore, the decision was, in 1950, the brothers abandoned St. Nicholas School in Bernalillo. In 1951, they abandoned the West Las Vegas Junior High in Las Vegas. And this was the end of the brothers' involvement in public schools, which went back to 1890 or so, when the brothers had taken over St. Nicholas School. And that whether anything else was possible, things I've heard about other parts of the country in connection with this, I would have to say, I don't know whether or not there was any viable alternative, whether or not the brothers could have kept in. But of course, what this meant was now we had two apostolates in New Mexico, St. Michael's High School, now called itself, and St. Michael's College, which became the College of Santa Fe, and that this was the limit of the brothers' work. What prospects were there for expansion of the work in New Mexico? At the moment, things didn't look too good. Now, let's go back to what I call the original apostolate, the school which grew out of the school the brothers established in 1859, now St. Michael's High School. One thing which might interest a lot of people today, particularly people somewhat younger than myself, In the 1930s, 1940s, into the 1950s, boarding schools seemed to have a certain attraction. You could find large numbers of parents who had the financial means, or sometimes made a little sacrifice to get the financial means, who considered sending a son or daughter to a Catholic boarding school was the best thing to do. And the boarding schools seemed to have an attraction which kept them well staffed with students. So, why not run a boarding school? After all, St. LaSalle had established the first boarding school run by the brothers to raise money to support the training of young brothers and prepare for the retirement of brothers who reached an age where they could no longer continue teaching. Why not continue to have boarding schools? Well, of course, here in Santa Fe, St. Michael's High School was slowly recovering from the Depression situation, when there had been very few parents who had the money to send a child to a boarding school. They simply couldn't do it. In 1942, at the end of the school year, of course, you might remember the war began in December 1941. There were only 80 boarders at St. Michael's High School, down significantly. The next year, there were 137 boarders, one of the highest numbers ever, out of a 570 enrollment. And largest enrollment they ever had, one of the largest enrollments of boarders. By the way, definitely World War II created a situation where Catholic boarding schools sometimes found themselves turning away students. We're filled up. We don't have any more space. And for various reasons, people in different situations really felt the best way to provide for the education of their children was to send them to a Catholic boarding school. This was toward the end of Brother Benilda's married term as principal. He had really established the school on a very solid foundation and probably made this situation where you had so many boarders, such good prospects, something very promising for the future. One thing that was done in 1950 was the boarding accommodations were improved drastically. I slept briefly in one of the dorms in the summer of 1947, and when somebody told me, we think we have to improve the boarding facilities, I said, I think you have a point there. The new boarding facilities were much better. I slept in them 2 or 3 times while the brothers were making a retreat here, and they were much more comfortable, much more congenial. And of course, they seemed to attract boarding students because the boarding section was doing quite well, and the income made it possible to support parts of the school, also contribute to the total support of the brothers throughout the district, advanced studies for the brothers, and so on. However, there was another interesting little problem. I don't know whether this has changed or not. College Street, which passes in front of the church here, used to be the main street through Santa Fe for the semis, and brothers and students in the dorms said about 11 or 12 o'clock at night, a stream of semi-trucks would come running down College Street, full speed ahead, almost shake you out of your bed. They shook the building so much, and that there was no way to move the dormitories for the boarders, and that something had to be done. What could be done? Well, of course, again, those of you from New Mexico know that we have very close by what is called in New Mexico the Mary Roundhouse, the center of the state government, and the state was looking for expansion of its facilities. And of course, the property controlled by St. Michael's High School across the street was a prime target. We'd like to have facilities nearby, not 2 miles away. They were interested in buying the property. So after some negotiations, and eventually both sides saw things the same way, the state bought the property, and the brothers started building a new school where it is now. And of course, at least whatever problems they have, they do not have the semis running around at 1 o'clock in the morning, almost rattling the boarders out of their dorm beds. And it's what I know about the facilities. I think it's a much nicer school, much nicer residence for the brothers. But this was possible because of the state government interest. Now, what is the situation which has developed since then? Again, keeping in mind what developed after Vatican II. The brothers' presence, the brothers' apostolate, making the brothers visible in Santa Fe, is maintained at St. Michael's High School. And I believe, following an expression which has become very popular among the brothers since we had a revision of our rule in 1987, I think it is an institution that is offering students a very good human and Christian education. Now, if you read all the writings of St. LaSalle, I did this because I was doing work on my dissertation, you'll never find this expression, a human and Christian education. However, if you read two of his educational works, The Conduct of the Schools and The Rules of Christian Civility and Decorum, you would see that he was very interested in providing a good human and Christian education for those who enrolled in the school. And then that's what the brothers did for years before we coined this expression. Well, St. Michael's High School is continuing that. Now, changes have come, but of course, any institution has to change with the times, unless, of course, you're interested in going out of business. Now, of course, the trick is what changes do we want to make? What changes help? What changes might we say, well, now maybe this is not as good as it looks, we won't do it. Well, the changes have been made. Let's look at some of these. The number of brothers present anyway in the school is greatly reduced. I believe there are now 2 brothers teaching full-time at St. Michael's High School. However, also the school has a qualified, certified faculty under the laws of the state of New Mexico. Almost half the faculty have advanced degrees, master's degrees. So there is a faculty that's prepared to give a human and Christian education. The school is fully accredited by the state of New Mexico, and the faculty and the performance take care of that. Also, it is accredited by North Central Association, which for many people represents more than getting an accreditation by your local state government. That school is accredited by the state government. Simply North Central would say, you've got a few things to do before we can consider you. So you have a school which is ready to give a good education. The student body, since 1986, when the Loretta nuns withdrew, is co-ed. And of course, you go around the world now, you'll find co-ed schools run by the brothers. Of course, there are a few stories about this. I understand the schools in the Philippines, where I was for a while, were some of the first of those to become co-ed, and a superior general showed up and saw a picture painted on the wall of the gym of St. LaSalle with 2 students, 1 boy and 1 girl. He asked, should we have a painting like that? And of course, the answer was, St. LaSalle is the patron of all teachers, so interested in all students. And the school is co-ed. I understand that maybe very shortly, there'll be an equal number of female students and male students, and that you'll probably maintain that balance. About 70% of the students are Catholic. Others belong to other religious groups, possibly no religion whatsoever. In my college teaching, I did encounter students who told me, when religion came up in the history courses, brother, you really got to explain this. I'm a nominal member of this church. I can't remember the last time I went there. And that when you start talking about religion, any form, you lose me. But also, there is financial aid for deserving, needy students, so that your student body can be cross-representative. And again, I think this would be a Lasallian idea. And the Lasallian tradition idea is maintained. It has been summarized in part as teach minds, touch hearts. There are 2 parts to the schooling, not just teaching minds, that you have to work on the students as individual. A religious setting is maintained, emphasis on the presence of God, that you are living, working, studying in the presence of God. And as all the students are also taught respect for all people, having boys and girls, members of different religions, different backgrounds, is something which will lead students to know members of other groups and develop a respect for them. There's almost no substitute for this. And also, the students are encouraged to work for a just society. Student activities, what can they do? The program, as I examined it, seems to be definitely pre-college. It's intended for students who are at least thinking about attending college, but it has a wide variety of courses, and there are also advanced placement courses for students planning to go to college, which can help them get a leap on their college education. And that apparently a number of students are ready, they profit from this, and do very well. There are an incredible variety of extracurriculars that I can remember in years past when one of our schools had 2 extracurriculars. Whatever the current athletics team was at the time, football, basketball, boxing, baseball, and the band. And those were all the extracurriculars. Well, St. Michael's High School has a much wider variety of extracurriculars, and I would assume if a student said, I want to find something that interests me, somebody could ask him, well, which one of these 5 you want to take? Because it's such a wide variety, which I think contributes widely to the education, the human and Christian education of the individual. I remember, for a variety of reasons, one of the extracurriculars into which I was injected, and you might notice the word I use there, was speaking, debating, public speaking. And to begin with, my reaction was, why do we have to do this? Well, after getting into it and having a little success and enjoying it, I found out for the rest of my life it was a very valuable experience. So I think extracurriculars of all types can be very helpful. They're there. And then, of course, those of you in the Santa Fe area might notice St. Mike's High does seem to have some successful teams, and that the teams seem to make quite an impact. I walked around part of the school building recently. I think they need another trophy case to take in the next batch of trophies that are coming in. By the way, this is nothing St. Mike's High would be unique at. I visited a school in California. I was living there in the high school. They were not allowed by the bishop to have a football team because football was so expensive for the high schools. Basketball was their main sport. The school was 10 years old, and the original sports trophy case built in the school was now hopelessly jammed. The brothers were trying to figure out where to put the next one. So it seems like our schools do manage to do well there. And I think this is also important if you're interested in it. I was one of the outstanding right fielders on any softball team. So I was not one of the outstanding athletes in the school. So, but other people did much better. But I think that's good. What do we have here? If somebody would look at what was established in 1859, then look at what St. Michael's High is now, and I do see it as the continuation of the original apostolate, they might say, it's a little bit different. I would say yes. In 150 years, I think a few things have changed, and I think that the school has made many useful changes, good changes, and that it's continuing the Lasallian tradition, the brothers' presence, making a contribution to northern New Mexico, and this is why Archbishop Lamy brought 5 brothers here in 1859, and we continue that. In this way, it is continuing the tradition and the outlook of the brothers, all to the good, and I'm glad to see that happening. Thank you.